Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday, May 26, 2022 City Council regular meeting. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And with that, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Larry to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, with that, we will move on to the adoption of the agenda.
So moved, Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I think Councilmember French or Deputy Mayor French has something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, colleagues, I'd like to add to our agenda here after the proclamation of gratitude to Senator Frockt and Pollett and Javier Valdez, the 2022 proclamation declaring the first day of June to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that?
Do we have a second?
Second for that?
Second.
Okay. The agenda has been moved in second with the addition of the proclamation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Pass unanimously. With that, we will go on to the proclamation of gratitude to Senator David Frockt, Representative Gerry Pollett, and Representative Javier Valdez. And they are all here. Thank you, Gerry. Been waiting an hour for you, so we appreciate that. All righty, I'm glad we're all here. Whereas the city of Lake Forest Park expresses its appreciation to the Washington State Legislature for their dedication in furthering legislative priorities and strengthening the partnership with the city of Lake Forest Park. And whereas Senator David Frockt, Representative Gerry Pollett, and Representative Javier Valdez serve the residents of the 46th Legislative District. Whereas the legislators of the 46th District serve the residents of Lake Forest Park by working diligently to advance the city of Lake Forest Park's 2021-22 state legislative agenda. And whereas legislators of the 46th District approved a 21-23 biennial capital budget, which invests $1.2 million towards the purchase of the lakefront property in Lake Forest Park. And whereas legislators of the 46th District approved a 2022 supplement capital budget, which allocates $100,000 towards the town center to Burt Gilman Trail connector and $72 million for crisis stabilization facilities. Whereas legislators of 46th District approved the Move Ahead Washington package, which invests $17 billion over the next 16 years to improve the state's transportation system. And whereas the state legislative district has been redrawn to ensure each district represents an equal number of residents, and the 46th legislative district no longer includes the city of Lake Forest Park. And whereas Senator David Frockt is retiring after a decade of service to the Washington State and the residents of the 46th legislative district. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park, and on behalf of the residents of Lake Forest Park, tribute is hereby paid to the legislators of the 46th legislative district and do hereby express their sincere gratitude. Senator David Frockt, Representative Gerry Pollett, and Representative Javier Valdez for the outstanding service, dedication, and commitment to the residents of Lake Forest Park, and urge all residents to join us in extending our appreciation for their public service. In witness thereof, signed this 26th day of May 2022. Jeff Johnson. And thank you, guys. And quickly before they all tell you how wonderful you are, because I know they're going to do that. So I have a gift for them. I'm not going to be on mic, but you know you're tired of coffee cups and all that stuff. I need some mics. How's that? I can still look at them. We decided we've had enough coffee cups and all that stuff, so we actually wanted to give you each a plaque. The first one is Representative Gerry Pollett, 46th Legislative District, in recognition of outstanding service, dedication, and commitment to the residents of Lake Forest Park. I'm going to hand these each to you, and you guys can each take a minute to say a word.
I thought you were going to give me a fishing net and we were going to walk along some streams.
Okay, well then we're gonna go to fish. I believe the next one here is Representative Javier, come on up. You and I are fishing, we're playing volleyball together. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And Senator Frockt, for all the great things you've done, we're gonna miss you. Thank you. I understand why you're tired. Good work with us anymore. Moved on. Thank you, sir. Very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, council, if you'd like to take a chance to say something before our guest speak, that would be awesome.
Why don't you go ahead, please?
I do want to thank you all, especially for the help and support for acquisition of our lakefront park. Today on our agenda, we have a presentation from the chair of our Parks and Recreation Board. And that's going to be a big part of the work of the Parks Board and also our public engagement to come up with a master plan for the park in the year or two ahead. So we invite you to all come back and visit us as we start working on developing that plan. Thank you so much for all you've done.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm saying farewell to three very good friends here and friends of mine and friends of Lake Forest Park, and we are going to miss you tremendously. I particularly want to thank you for all that you have done to support the needs of our citizens when it comes to mental health and crisis intervention. Without your support, I don't think we'd be looking at the potential for a crisis center up here in North King County. It's going to be tremendously important, not only to our citizens, but to all of the citizens across North King County, and we have you to thank for it. I also want to particularly thank you for your support and Senator Frockt especially for the psychiatric facilities that are now being built at Northwest Hospital, which also will be serving the people of North King County. So very special work that you guys have done for us and really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Gentlemen, it seems like it's been a very short journey, but it's also been a long one. And you three have done a tremendous amount of work for this community and for the region. And I look around this community as we walk and ride our bikes and drive through. And there's so many aspects of this community that you have influenced and touched. And your support has been absolutely instrumental in our success here. And we thank you so much. I'd like to say, I'd rather say farewell rather than goodbye. I know we will all be in touch, and Senator Frockt, your service has been extraordinary. You've been a calming force in the Senate and a real leader when it came to capital budgets and pragmatism about finding ways to really help the lives of so many people, particularly in the areas of mental health. And we have so much to thank you all for. So we thank you, and we really sincerely hope you stay really in close touch.
Thank you. Councilmember Riddle, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I like going a little later so I can just say everything my colleagues said. And so everything my colleagues said, and you have been instrumental in being a good representative of what it means to be a good policymaker. And it has been wonderful watching you do your work and being able to attempt to rise to that standard. You're diligent in your work, you're honest, you're communicative with your constituents, and it's just, you're an inspiration to those that are thinking about going into politics, that it might be tough, but you can stay true to who you are. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Tracy.
Thank you. And I want to extend my personal thanks to all three of you. And adding to what Councilmember Riddle said, I've never seen a delegation work so closely together. I mean, that's been amazing. I don't know how many town halls where all three, or at least two of you have shown up together. Look at that. And again, modeling that kind of behavior, I think really is going to lead to some great civic change. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, yeah, and I'll add to my thanks for you for representing the city and the people of Lake Forest Park. In particular, public transit is an issue that is very near and dear to me. And I was really glad to see the Move Ahead Washington package pass, which has a tremendous investment in public transportation for the city, the county, really the whole state. So thank you for all your work. And I look forward to seeing at least Representatives Valdez and Pollett continue on and help represent the region. And good retirement to Senator Frockt.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
I too want to express our appreciation and my appreciation to having such a tremendous delegation that has served not just our area, but serves the state of Washington in such a positive and, how do I say, polite way. That in a time of such discourse, to have such representatives in the senator that represent us so well, you are an example of how we would like our politicians to represent all of the citizens of the state, not just the district, but of all citizens of this state so well. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful retirement and you find a new calling. And I think that the public is well served if you can find a calling that serves all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, council. Well, guys, you know me, I'm just going to put it right out there. I'm going to miss you. We really appreciate the years. I kind of laugh with my 11th year and I've been with you guys. You're my family. You guys have gotten us a lot of help raising stuff. I think some of us got kicked off a property when we were taking a tour one day. We have that to go look back on together. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I know their cars will break down and Gerry needs gas for his lawnmower. And I can't control the prices, but I did put in new pumps for you, if you notice that. So there we go. And I would love to fish with you someday. As you all know, I have a dream of that. And we will carry on what we can to keep what you've done for us. We're going to keep moving forward. We're going to miss you, but we know you're there. But I guarantee you, the day that culvert up there is opened up and the day that park opens up, you're the first on the list to be down here because we could not have done this without you. And like everybody said, I admire you. I appreciate you being the way you've been. And I've sat there and listened to you have to talk to people. And I think you're a great example to us how to treat each other and how we're going to move forward. And I believe we're the start of the people on this that we need to start moving forward. So thank you guys. And I appreciate everything. And if you would love to say a word, we have a podium up here and I'm sure we'd love to hear something for you. Except for the retired guy. I know you're a little old to be doing that stuff. So just saying, I can probably get a discount for some Mariner tickets now. So let's see what I can do. So if you guys like to say anything, you're more than welcome.
That one? That one? First of all, I want to say on today, it's been obviously a very difficult time in our country. I want to you're the first law enforcement officer at the scene since we've had the shooting. And I wanted to say publicly, thank you for being there and for your brethren and sisters for always running towards the danger when we need you. This has been a difficult time in our country the last few years, a lot of complicated things we've had to deal with socially. And I think it's just important to recognize, even as we try to make everything better for everybody, that we say thank you. So thank you, officer. Appreciate that. That was like the nicest thing I can't tell you how much I appreciate those kind words and those comments. And it really means a lot to me personally, because they've indulged me here in my, I'm not gonna get a microphone that much, very much longer. So I appreciate this. From other people who have run for office, who are serving constituents, you all know, even at the state Senate level, at a congressional level, at a local level, how hard it is and how stressful it can be to represent people, to make people mad, to make people happy, and to make people confused about whether they're mad or happy at you. It really means a lot to hear that from colleagues who have stood for election, because it's a really vital public service. I am so grateful to have had the chance to do this for these 12 years. I always wanted to do this. To serve as a lawmaker. I started out in Congress 30 years ago as an aide. And so it was something I wanted to do. And it's very meaningful to me to be able to try to make change. And I thought I would just say one thing. Well, first of all, thank you for all the comments about the capital budget. That's been absolutely a pleasure to work with you. And the one thing I wanted to do when I got in this position, when they gave me the keys to billions of dollars of your taxpayer money, was number one, don't screw it up. I don't think we did. And second, do what I could in a fair way to try to help the communities that I represent, not to the expense of other communities, but also, understanding that I was in a position that maybe I could help out. And my colleagues, Gerry and Javier, and before Javier, Jessen, we worked well together. And we worked together in all of these things, and we always worked together to help on the transportation issues. In the Capitol, I had some special pull because of my chairmanship, but my colleagues were in different positions on transportation and other things. And so we really worked as a team to work with all of you. And I think that's how it should be. I just would like to say one thing, and maybe just to maybe tie it back. I've passed about almost 60 pieces of legislation in my 12 years. Some were little, some were big, some were complicated, some were not so complicated. Some were good, maybe some not so good. The one that I'm most proud of was one that didn't pass, and that was I introduced the first red flag law in Washington in 2015 after a shooting that didn't take place here, but was the one in Santa Barbara. And we were the fourth state. Eventually, I couldn't get it through the legislature, but the people voted for it. And in as partisan times we had in the legislature, sometimes the people get it right. And they did. 70% of the people voted for that law when it went to the ballot. And I used to not love the initiative process. And now I'm grateful that we have an initiative process, because sometimes when the politics are stuck, we have to go back to our roots and ask the people what they think. And when you get 70% on anything in this state, that means the Democrats voted for it, independents voted for it, and Republicans voted for it. And we need more of that in this country to solve what I think is one of our most horrible problems that is unlike anything else in the country. So keep working on that to make your own community safer. I think the mental health is part of it. And just know that even when it looks dark, there are ways to maybe solve problems and make some dent and make things better when it looks like we can't do it. So please keep working. And I'm going to try to keep working outside of the political system. And just say again, thank you for all your support. It's been an honor and a pleasure for me to represent Lake Forest Park these last 10 years. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much for this honor. And I want to say thank you for the terrific things you said about our retiring colleague. I'm the guy with the white hair, so I don't get to say, oh, he's the old guy in the group. And mine was, oh no, it was white when I started too. But Senator Frockt truly has made an incredible mark on the entire state, and you singled out behavioral health. There's so many other areas in addition to his work directly with you and the community for so many things that we love and will love to see. And on that note, I want to say, you've made it easy for us to collaborate. People, you say, oh, you three collaborate so well. It's a reflection of the work that you've done and your collaborative work and spirit and willingness to partner with us, not to compete with us, but to share what this community would like, what your dreams are, And when we couldn't do something, to not criticize, but say, how do we roll up our sleeves and get it done together next year? And a lot of these things took, multiple years to get done, and many of them are unfinished. I'll return to a couple of those, but thank you for that and for your predecessors on the council. You showed the way for being collaborative, and we really appreciate that. And for those of you who like at the Sound Cities Forum recently, I say this all the time. People should model what you've done for meeting and assisting legislators to work and represent all of our.
Got it. Hi, everyone. Thank you really for this wonderful honor here today. I'm the new guy. I've been here half the time of this 10-year tenure. Been here now 5 years, and I know outside of Councilmember Cassover, I didn't know any one of you, and you're probably wondering, who is this guy? What's he going to do for us, or is he going to still work in great partnership with Senator Frockt and Representative Pollett? And here in the 46, we have a long history of the entire delegation working together because we know that it was right for our constituents and our communities. I think one of the proudest moments I had was actually in my few years in the legislature, my 5 years, is actually when I was it was in 2019. I was one of the vice chairs of the Transportation Committee, and I successfully was able to convince our transportation chair in the House that we only funded like 26, 27, 28, or high 20s projects in the entire state that year, new projects. And so, we have 49 districts. So a lot of districts weren't going to get a project that year. But I kept really working on talking to our House Transportation Chair about why it was important that the 46th district needed a project, because it's been long overdue. And the one that we settled on was for the roundabout here in Lake Forest Park, because the city had not received transportation funding for a project in a long, long time. And I remember going to the floor, talking to I see Representative Pollett, I go, hey, I want to do this. What do you think? Because again, we work together, we talk, we collaborate. And he was like, yeah, let's get it done. And of course, and then it's that later that day, actually, I walked over across the rotunda and pull Senator Frockt off the floor. I waved him and I said, come on over. And I showed him, the spreadsheet I had. And I go, hey, we can get this project for Lake Forest Park because we're only going to get, upper 20 projects in the whole state, but we're going to get one right here in the 46. I go, we need to get to Lake Forest Park. What do you think? Do you agree? Of course, he's absolutely. And I just wanted to say, to be helping with that project and working with us all together for something that this city again has been historically kind of ignored for our transportation, and was I think a real great feeling for me. And I want to echo what my seatmate Representative Pollett said about, again, we're still working here for you. I mean, we know that your residents and your citizens still have to go to I guess our old 46, new 46, you're still coming across the 522, and we're still going to fight for you, for that sound transit and that stop that was due to you and has now been postponed, so you can count on us. And that's, again, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to serve all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would think if it's okay, I'm pretty sure we'd like to get a picture with you. Would that be okay with the council? And I think we actually, guys, I'd like to give these people a standing ovation because they really deserve it. So thank you, guys. I know you can't see it, but there's 13,400 people on Zoom standing up in their living room right now. So just thought you'd make you feel good about that. So we're going to take a second. Let's get some pictures with our idols out here, and let's go on out here, guys. I told Senator Frockt, we all got dressed up just for you tonight. So
Look here and then look there. And smile and be happy about retirement.
Not all, council. Great picture. All right. All right.
Having some good events. I'll invite you to the park.
I hope so. I'll be there.
okay.
No, it's okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a good site.
Thank these guys for being so patient with.
Yep. Okay, with that, we're going to move on.
Thank you, Matt. Perfect.
We're going to have the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board plan for 2022. I would really like to thank Tyler and Corey for being patient. Oh, I missed that, didn't I?
Yep.
Sorry. I missed something. You guys, I just wanted to kind of get you ready to go. You're going to be up next, okay? Give us 1 second. I'm sorry, Corey. Thank you. Okay, at this time, though, we will do a proclamation. I am sorry, I forgot that. For Tom, I'll let you read it about Gun Violence Awareness Day for June 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a 2022 proclamation declaring the first Friday in June to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. I apologize for my voice. This proclamation declares the first Friday in June to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city of Lake Forest Park to honor and remember all victims and survivors of gun violence and to declare that we as a country must do more to reduce gun violence. Whereas 21 victims were killed in a senseless act of violence at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas by a gunman. And whereas since the onset of COVID-19, the United States has seen a rise in gun violence, increased gun sales, particularly among first-time owners, along with millions of children atypically home from school, have greatly increased the risk of child gun suicide and unintentional shootings. And whereas an estimated of 4.6 million United States children live in households with at least one loaded, unlocked firearm, and whereas an estimated of 30% of children in the state of Washington live in a home with a firearm, and 55% of these children live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked firearm. And whereas every year in the United States, nearly 350 children under the age of 18 unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else. That's roughly one unintentional shooting per day. And 77% of these incidents take place inside a home. And whereas every year in the United States, another 590 children die by gun suicide, most often using guns belonging to a family member. And over the past decade, the firearm suicide rate among children and teens has increased by 59%. Native Americans and Alaska Natives have the highest suicide rate amongst youth. And whereas in the state of Washington, 53 of all gun deaths among children and teens are suicides. And in King County, 75% of firearms used in child suicide were stored unlocked. And whereas in the state of Washington, an average of 61 children and teens die by guns every year. And Black children and teens are 2 times as likely as their white peers to die by guns. And whereas in incidents of gun violence on school grounds, 79% of active shooters are current students or recent graduates. And 80% of shooters under the age of 18 obtain their guns from their own home or from the home of a relative or friend. And whereas evidence strongly suggests that secure firearm storage is an essential component to any effective strategy to keeping students and schools safe. And research shows that secure firearm storage practices are associated with up to an 85% reduction in the risk of self-inflicted and unintentional firearm injuries among children and teens. Whereas across the country, lawmakers, community members, and local leaders are working together to implement public awareness campaigns, such as Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America's Be Smart program, which is endorsed by the National PTA, and which encourages secure gun storage practices and highlights the public safety risks of unsecure guns. And King County has made resources, including King County's Lock It Up program, available to the public, including translated materials that include the top 6 languages spoken by our families. And whereas the City of Lake Forest Park's responsible storage law went into effect in 2019, and whereas Washington state law can impose a criminal and or civil penalties on adults when a child gains unsupervised access to firearms that are not stored securely. And whereas keeping students, teachers, and staff safe from the threat of violence should be the responsibility of all stakeholders at each of our school sites in all adult stakeholders, I should say, in each of our school sites in each of our communities. And whereas a national coalition of organizations have designated the first Friday in June as the National Gun Violence Awareness Day, beginning in 2015, to honor Hadia Pendleton, a teenager, who marched in the presidential inaugural campaign parade in 2013 and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later, who would now be celebrating her 25th birthday. And more than 100 Americans whose lives are cut short every day, and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day. Now, therefore, in recognition and honor of the victims of the tragedy in Uvalde, Texas, and in recognition of National Gun Violence Awareness Day on this first Friday in June 3rd, 2022, the mayor and the city council of Lake Forest Park renews our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge all we can do to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. And therefore, we encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives and to help educate their communities about safe storage of firearms in the home and to support this campaign by pledging to wear orange, the color worn by hunters for safety, on June 3rd, the first Friday in June 2022, to raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence and victims and survivors. And witness here, whereof this day, 26th day of May 22, Jeff Johnson, Mayor.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, moving on. Now we'll bring in Corey and Tyler. And I know we have one council member here that's just ecstatic to hear this. Councilmember Bodie's right over there and big smile on her face. So Corey, I'll let you take it away and welcome Tyler. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you got on our new system. It's pretty awesome. So how you doing tonight, Corey?
Doing good. This is kind of fun watching and being involved at the council. Yeah, I'll let Tyler take it away though.
Okay, can y'all hear me? I see some nods. I'm Tyler Dittman. I'm the chair of the city's Parks and Rec Advisory Board. It's great to be here. Our board of 6 meets monthly, and we work on ideas to maintain, improve, and promote the city's parks and rec programs. Councilmember Bodie is a close partner, and Corey, as our staff liaison, is an excellent resource. We could not do what we do without them. Our 2022 work plan was attached to the agenda. I hope you all have a copy of that you can refer to. As you can see, the work plan has 4 main project areas. The first, with our focus on parks, it's right in our name. The board is quite excited by the prospect of the new waterfront park, though we realize that the city has a lot of work to do on that. On our work plan, we have space set aside to assist with that process. For example, by helping with community outreach, to listen to ideas from residents about what they would like to see in that park. We look forward to working with the council on all that. Our second work plan item is about providing relevant and up-to-date information to residents about the city's parks and recreation opportunities. We assist the city staff with ideas and content to update the webpage. That's what that one mostly covers. The third work plan item is about parks and rec promotion. In particular, using social media. We've raised many ideas for this that sound fun, but we haven't really moved forward with any. So that's still on our plan. The fourth work plan item, however, has been quite active lately. To focus on increasing recreation opportunities, we have 3 main projects going on right now. The first one is Saturday morning yoga and Pilates classes in the parks. We're planning to sponsor about 8 Saturday morning sessions of yoga, Pilates, and other movement-based activities in a local park. The events will be open to the public and free. We have partnered with several local professionals to provide their services as the instructors. The aim is to both promote the specific activity in the park, but also more broadly to encourage more and different park users to get out and about in our lovely parks. These will occur Saturday mornings, 9-ish, we think, in July and August. And we are still working on selecting the appropriate park for that. Another item we have under this heading is the park's walking tours. We have a vision of establishing walking routes that connect our various parks throughout our city, through the trails, through the streets. To achieve this goal, we see a combination of short-term, medium-term, and long-term projects. The short-term is the most readily achievable with our current funding and staff time, and that is to collect various resources of existing themed walks that are already out there. Many of us have pamphlets in our houses of the historic walks of Lake Forest Park or the tree walk. We'd like to collect that all in one spot for easy reference and provide that on our the city webpage. With a little more effort and coordination, we think a potential medium-term project is to coordinate street closures to encourage walking, running, biking activities between the parks, and that'd be kind of fun. A longer-term plan would require additional funding, of course, including sidewalks, crosswalks, and signage, things like that. Finally, our third recreation program we're working on is to increase pickleball opportunities at Horizon View Park. Pickleball is a fast-growing sport that needs courts. We're working with city staff to use existing grant funds to add lines to the Horizon View tennis court to allow at least 2, possibly 4 pickleball courts to go on there, as well as the tennis court lines. Community organizers hope to crowdfund a substantial, kind of beefy pickleball net, which would be on wheels that could be used on the court. And otherwise, players could bring their own pickleball nets. An open issue that we're still investigating is the effect of these additional courts and players on the parking available in that park. I will say these last 3 items have been really engaging among the board members. We get really excited about it. We have fun talking about the different ideas and hearing from the community about what they think is important. So that's been great. That's just a brief summary of what we have going on. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions, council? Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
I don't really have any questions, but I want to thank Tyler and Corey. We recently revitalized the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. So it had been on hiatus for a while, and it's really up and running and going well. And Tyler has, are you our only returning member? Well, Tony was on previously, but anyway, Tyler has stuck with it from the last iteration to this one. And Corey has really been helpful in providing advice on what the city staff can and can't do, and finding some small sources of money for some of these volunteer activities. So I just want to say thank you to both of them. It's been really fun to be there as part of the kickoff of this group. And I think that this is good priming the pump for the big effort on the waterfront park to come. So anyway, thank you both.
Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, okay. I'd just like to say too, thank you very much. And I'm really glad you brought up the pickleball thing, because I was going to be stressed out if you didn't, because I know we have a member really worried about that a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to see the horseshoes up there too, but we'll work on that later. And I do thank you, Councilmember Bodie. I do. You guys are on one of the most exciting things to ever happen in Lake Forest Park in a long time, and that's the waterfront park and all the other parks we have. So Tyler, I appreciate, and Corey, as usual, you do a fantastic job. Thanks for hanging in there with us, and we hope to be seeing you more, and we'd like to see you all in person. And Corey also is in charge of we're bringing back a lot of the events. So thank you again. And you guys have a great night, and we'll let you go for now. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I believe we're on to citizens' comments. Okay, I believe the only comments we have is Zoom. I will be handing this over to Matt. Matt will call on you. Please state your name, and that's all you need to do. Remember, you have 3 minutes, and go ahead, Matt, and we'll start with public comment.
If you wish to address the council, please use the raise hand function. I believe first we have Roy. I'm going to butcher that name, Chaudhary. Sorry about that.
Welcome, Roy.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Respected members of the City Council, we, the neighbors of 155th Street, have appealed against a tree permit to cut down the remaining trees on a neighbor's lot on 3832 Northeast 155th Street. This is a hillside lot just down the hill from Sheridan Market, and it is situated on a critical area as marked by the city's own interactive maps. These mature trees have extensive root systems that protect our hilly area. Just 7 years ago, this lot had 11 trees. Then 5 of these 11 trees were cut down with a permit from the city. After that, 3 additional trees were cut down without a permit illegally. Now, the city had yet again issued a permit to cut down the remaining trees on this lot as well. When the permit application was posted in January, we neighbors organized a public petition, which was signed by over 200 citizens, and it was submitted to the city. We heard no response back from the city, despite continually following up with the city and also commenting on the tree board's meeting, where we were heard by the tree board and we were shown support, but the tree board has no power. The city arborist has left her position with an incomplete tree report. Finally, this month, the permit was issued on May 12th, and the neighbors were presented with an option to appeal by June 1st by the head of the planning department. But just a day before yesterday, we were told that we only have 1 day left to get our appeal in. So we didn't have enough time. We scrambled together, we put something in, and we have submitted that report today. The planning department has deliberately ignored citizen comments and had sided with this commercial developer, ignoring the public petition and also ignoring the comments that we have submitted until now. And while our neighbors were preparing this appeal in the last 2 weeks, the builder has already sent a tree company twice to take these trees down. The neighbors had to get the Lake Forest Park police involved for due process to be followed. All of these violations have been overlooked by the planning department, citing that there's a contradiction in the city code, which they failed to correct. Both these times, they did not, the builder did not have the notice posted. And now if you go to the lot, you will see that the tree permit notice has been posted behind a bush, which is hardly visible from the road. We have submitted our appeal before the deadline today and urge the city to withdraw all the permits issued on this lot. We would like to address the current tree canopy problem due to the 3 illegally cut trees, and maybe the city can have the builder submit a RU permit to have them build around the trees and not by cutting the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Matt, next.
Next, we have Mr. Jeff Sneddon.
Welcome, Jeff. You there, Jeff? Jeff?
Now I'm here. Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sorry, I work at Microsoft. This is a computer. I don't understand it. Anyway, my name is Jeff Sneddon. I live at 15415 Beach Drive Northeast. Like others, I'm going to address the issue of this tree permit that was granted to the property owner at 3852 Northeast 155th. As a neighbor and a believer in the tree heritage of Lake Forest Park, I became involved in the effort to save these trees. The permit that the city granted, and Chandra has already referred to this, there were originally 11 trees on the property, 5 of which in 2015, 5 of which were labeled retain protect. With this approval of this permit and the removal of the 2 other trees, there will be no trees left on this property. I'm not going to repeat a number of the things that have been covered already, but I did want to elaborate a little bit on this catch-22. It's a situation in the city code where a permit, the city can grant a permit to a homeowner or a developer to cut trees down, but that permit gives them the right to legally cut them down immediately, while at the same time legally allows citizens 2 weeks to appeal the decision. This is a perfect catch-22, and it really needs to be fixed. I'm skipping ahead here. We also understand that the planning and building department, based on the property owner's plans, had a choice or a dilemma to either cut the trees down or protect the root system of a nearby legacy tree. It appeared to be one or the other. But it seems as if there are really 3 options. You can cut the trees down, or you can protect the root system, or you can relocate the home to in a slightly different position, to accommodate the home, the trees, and the root systems. Everything is a trade-off. But in this case, there was not a true trade-off. The proper decision in our mind should have been to deny the tree removal permit to begin with. And even if, and by doing so, that still offers the property owner options, specifically the right to appeal the decision in what is called, I believe, a reasonable economic use exception. In our opinion, given all that you've heard, the right thing to do here, given the circumstances, is to pull this permit, then fix the code, then do a more involved arborist study, a more involved and complete arborist study. Consider the three trade-offs: cutting the trees down, saving the roots, or relocating the home, and then decide to approve or deny the permit. And that's the action that we would prefer to see happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Snedden. Go ahead, Matt.
Next, we have Julian Anderson.
Welcome, Julian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Julian, we can hear you.
We could hear you.
Oh, I'm unmuting myself again. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Julian Anderson, bringing a message from Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation. We support the neighbors of 3832 Northeast 155th who oppose the tree removals documented in the tree permit 0009 and support their efforts to appeal the issuance of this permit to a hearing with the city's hearing examiner. Kind of my headline on this is what is said and what is done. Our urban forest distinguishes us from our neighboring jurisdictions. Aerial photos give striking testimony. In many places and in many ways, the city acknowledges the environmental value of the trees, such as by the restraints in our municipal code, by the use of the full value of illegally removed trees as the basis for civil penalties assessed, by requiring that tree removal contractors be licensed to do business in Lake Forest Park, and by the forceful preamble of the community forest plan. And yet, consider what is done. At this lot, we see proposed the next step in the slow elimination of forest trees. In July 2015, as you've heard, City Arborist Woodbury evaluated 11 trees, recommended 5 healthy trees to be retained and protected on this plot, while other trees should and could be removed. Sometime later, 2 of those 5 healthy trees were cut down, one stump still obviously visible. Stewardship Foundation has not seen any documentation that these 2 removals were permitted by the city. This current permit threatens 2 more of the trees that the city arborist recommended be saved and protected. This slow motion removal of the urban forest in a thinly canopied area of the city is just not acceptable. The Stewardship Foundation will be an active participant in this appeal hearing. We will continue to advocate for changes in city codes and practices and budgetary priorities in support of the health of our urban forest and thus the health and safety of all of us. And we acknowledge with appreciation the neighbors of this property who raised the alarm over this tree permit and the deeper issues where a solution should be found. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Matt?
I believe that's all the speakers, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I'll give anybody another minute, a couple seconds to see if any other hands come up. Okay. Seeing none, correct, Matt? Okay, and with that, we will close citizens' comments and move on. Thank you, citizens. Thank you, Matt. At this time, we're going to do a confirmation review for the tree board. I'm excited to introduce all of you to Mandee Parker. I love that name. Position 7, 3-year term, expires 2/28/2025. I think we'll be bringing her up. And hello, how are you this evening?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm dandy. I'm going to let you talk and tell everybody about yourself, and then the council will ask you some questions. Like I told you when I interviewed you, that they can be a little mean and nasty, but just be ready for it, okay? Okay, well, tell us all about yourself.
All right, sure. My name is Mandee Parker, and my family and I moved to Lake Forest Park just about a year ago. I work as a speech pathologist at Virginia Mason, and I have a 7-month-old daughter. So that's me in a little nutshell.
Well, I think you got to go a little deeper and tell them what your hobby is.
Oh, sure, of course, of course, my tree hobby. Yeah, so a couple years ago, I started learning how to climb trees recreationally. So I've taken a couple workshops and I learned how to set my own rigging, and I love to do that when I can. I like to travel and climb big trees all over the world. So that's one of my favorite things to do.
Okay, council. Any questions? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you for your willingness to volunteer for the tree board. In my mind, education and outreach is one of the major parts of what the tree board does, educating and outreach to the community. And so I'm wondering, are there any particular areas that you would like the tree board to focus on with reaching out to the community?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's definitely one of the reasons that I applied for the tree board, is that that's something that's very important to me. I know my career doesn't have much to do with trees per se, but in my work, I have done a lot of organizing, education programs for youth, of course, but also for community members. So that's something I have some experience with and that I'm really interested in doing. One of my favorite part about Lake Forest Park is the trees and how stunning they are. And I think that the more people know about how remarkable it is to live in a city like this, where that is such a keystone piece, is very important to me. And I think that would be really fun to be a part of. So I would love to work for education and outreach and organize some, tree related events. I think that would be really fun.
Thank you very much. And thanks for your willingness to serve.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. Obviously, you have a place in your heart for large trees. And I know one of the aspects of tree preservation here is preserving the large trees. But my question is, what do you think can be done to bring up the next generation of trees?
Bring up the next generation of trees. Ooh, that's a good question. Are you thinking about like planting events and things like that?
Sure. I'm open to all your ideas.
I love planting events. I think that having more of those would always be really fun. And again, kind of this fits in with education and outreaches. We have great schools here, finding ways to get kids involved, just getting kids outside and getting kids interested and excited about what makes their home special, with more planting events. I think would be a great way for the next generation of trees and the next generation of tree enjoyers. Would be. Yeah, so I think those two kind of go hand in hand, actually, the growing of the trees and the education piece.
Fantastic. And a small follow-up question. Have you ever slept in big trees?
I have slept in big trees. Have you? Is that something?
No. Perhaps you've brought a new event to Lake Forest Park.
Tree camping, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are getting a little personal up here, so let's move on. Yes. Councilmember Tracy, go ahead.
Hi, and thank you again for volunteering for this position. One of the things the tree board's working on is a letter to new Lake Forest Park residents, informing them about the trees. And since you're a new Lake Forest Park resident yourself, what do you wish you had known about the trees in Lake Forest Park, when you were moving in?
That is a wonderful question. That's something I've heard about and I'm really interested in and appreciate very much. we were actually pretty well informed moving in here. This is one of the reasons that we chose to live here was based on, again, this kind of the policies that are in place. We really appreciate the commitment to the preservation. So we came in with a lot of knowledge, but I think that is kind of unique. So I think that I would want to make sure that new residents did have the kind of a boiled down version of the tree code provided to them right away. It's just so that they knew right away that it wasn't necessarily as casual as maybe it sounds like some new residents are thinking it is to remove a tree. So I think that finding a good way to get the heart of the matter down to some pretty easy, digestible information would be the most important part. But just that it's more than just we have big, beautiful trees. It's why they're important, what makes this such an important piece to the health and beauty of our city, kind of including that why really right out of the gate, more than just, oh, this looks nice, but really why.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, anybody? Okay, would anybody like to move? Yes, go ahead.
I gotta find her name.
Mandee.
Yes, thank you. I'd very much like to move how do we say this, acceptance of Amanda as a new member of the tree board.
Second.
And moving second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Pass unanimously. And Amanda, I'd just like to say, like when I interviewed you, I am amazed at, but let's be honest, folks, she obviously is going through some stuff. You're an amazing woman. I love the way you smile, and I'm excited for you to be part of this. I look forward to whatever you can do to help us, and we want to hope the best for you. And I am really now, I'm looking forward to this tree camping thing we got going on, but I don't know. Our city attorney's right there. I don't know what the liability is on that, but
yeah,
we'll work on that. But you can maybe
for
be
the future.
We finally have somebody who can put our zip line up there, so we've got that going for us.
That'd be fun.
I really
There are also
appreciate
the
it.
occasional cat rescues.
Yeah,
that
cat
might be
rescue.
good.
That's another thing.
Yeah,
And I'm a big fan of those guys, actually. Thank you very
they're
much.
amazing. Thank you. I
Take care of
appreciate it very
yourself.
much.
We'll
It was
be
nice
getting a
meeting
hold
all
of
of you.
It's nice meeting, and we'll be getting a hold of you, and you take care of yourself, and we'll be talking soon, okay?
Thank you so much.
You bet. Take care. Bye. Okay. Thank you, council, very much. I think this is good for all of us and her including. So, okay. I'm moving on to the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Consent calendar is moving second. Any discussion about the consent calendar? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Jumped the gun. Okay, with this, I'm really darn excited because for the first time live in City Hall, you guys get to meet Andy. Come on up, Andy. And I'm going to say probably more, but you'll take telling everybody. Andy is expecting a baby, or he says so, but I think it's his wife. But congratulations on that. That's why the mask. He wants to take good care of his family, and we appreciate that. I can't wait till we actually see all of you. But thank you very much, and take it away, buddy. I appreciate it. Button.
Either. On the bottom. There you go.
That working now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, perfect. Great. Thank you for having me. Wish I was here to talk about trees. That sounds fun. I'm actually here to talk about code updates, two in particular, and a little bit of like housekeeping I thought I'd cover first. So there's two types of code updates that are part of this amendment that's proposed here. And I figured I'd take them one at a time, like cover one, allow time for discussion, move on to the next one and discuss that? Or do you want me to just kind of blast through them one after the other. And
May actually do me a favor because I want to see it work. Push the little button down beside you and raise that thing up a little bit so the mic gets up. No, right down on the left-hand side, you'll see a button there. There you go.
I see.
There's a microwave and an espresso as well.
I think we paid a lot of
Okay.
money for that, though. So I want to make sure it works. So thank you.
Is it? So are you still, okay, I think, yeah, I can hear my voice reverberating a little better now. Did you all hear that question? Okay, so is there a preference on which approach you'd like me to take? Okay, I'll take them one at a time. I feel like that'd be more digestible. So the first update I wanted to discuss pertains to the adopted version of the city's stormwater manual. So the background on this is the permit requires that we have a set of technical standards regulating land development, the stormwater management aspect of land development. And the least restrictive standards we're allowed to adopt are contained in Ecology's stormwater management manual. We also have the option of adopting a stronger set of standards, which the city did back in 2007 originally, when this was first required. The manual we have adopted is the King County Surface Water Design Manual. And every time Ecology reissues the NPDES permit, they update their manual. And one of the requirements in the permit is that you have to update your standards to maintain compliance with theirs at a minimum. And so that, believe it or not, is can be a pretty significant undertaking. If your code, as our cities does and some other cities do, makes reference to a specific year of the manual, then you have to go through a formal code amendment process, undergo the SEPA review and so forth. And so, it costs several $1,000s. And some communities, especially the smaller ones, like our neighbors in Briar, have taken the approach of just changing the way that their reference to that manual is described in the code as current, King County Stormwater Manual. And so you kind of future-proof your compliance with that requirement of the permit each time that it comes around. And so that's the sensible and efficient thing, in my opinion, to do. And so that's kind of the way that we've drafted the update to the code here. And I want to share that I've also given some thought to the question of why might we not want to make that change? The question's been asked of me. What if there is something in a future updated manual that is problematic that we don't want to accept just automatically? And review first before we make the change. And it's a fair question. And the way I think about it is this. So first of all, the important to keep in mind that the permit requires you to make this change. So there may be some change that is proposed in this update to the manual that ultimately won't be optional for us to decline. There is a situation in which it might be, which is that there's something in the King County manual that is not proposed in Ecology's manual, if those two diverge. And I'm not the subject matter expert on the content of these two manuals and what makes them different. So I consulted with our drainage plan review engineer on this for his take on the matter. There are lots of changes that occur to the manual each time it's updated. And to kind of try to keep this simple, I'll share with you that in general, the reviewer's feedback is that the differences between the two manuals are not very significant. It's not there are some notable differences. I can explain the two that he referenced for me if you're interested in hearing more about those. But in general, the manuals are very similar. The King County manual, of course, Ecology doesn't allow you to have a manual that's less restrictive than theirs. So the King County manual does set stronger stormwater management performance standards. And that is advantageous to us because these impacts that are created when land is developed, the permit's always going to require that somebody manages those. So the county's manual, the the way that the stronger standards manifest is that it places more of that burden on the developer, which relieves burden on the city in the amount that we have to invest in managing those impacts. So whereas the changes are modest each time the manual is updated, in general, that's the sort of policy decision that's baked into selecting this manual, the county's manual over Ecology's manual. The other thing that I wanted to note that is important that's related to that is that given that the magnitude of the changes, as our consultant shared with me, are typically on the modest side, when we are contemplating the impact of these changes, it's likely not going to be the kind of thing that leaps off the page at us that has alarm bells ringing. It's going to be the kind of change that we might ponder what the impacts are, but those are going to be speculative at that moment, and the type of thing that typically takes some time to allow it to play out and see if on balance they make sense for us or not. And if they don't, you can update which manual you adopt at any time. There's no required time frame for when you make changes like this. So the idea behind describing the manual this way in the code is to essentially wait until if there are ever such substantial differences between the county's manual and Ecology's manual, wait for that to cause a problem and then address it, as opposed to trying to, I guess, predict what those impacts might be and get ahead of them. So that's one change. Are there any questions?
Any questions on that first change? Yes. Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. And thank you, Andy. I have a question about how often the NPDES and the ecology are revised. What's that cadence?
About once every 5 years so far. So,
And do they usually revise at the same time, or is there a lag from one to the next typically?
it's a good question. I believe, so in this permit cycle, the start of the permit term was 2019. Ecology's manual was updated in 2019. The county's was updated in 2021. I don't know, honestly, if that's what has been typical in the past. It makes sense to me that it would be, because the county's probably waiting to see what Ecology does before they update theirs. They want to ensure that it would be consistent.
I could add to that slightly if you want. The DOE requires that if you adopt a different manual, it has to be equal to their manual. So King County has to wait to make revisions so they can show we're equal to Ecology's manual. So it's always going to be after. It's always going to lag a little bit.
Thank you. I think that's it for right now.
Any other questions for Andy at this time? Okay, seeing none, move on, buddy.
Okay, great. So the second more extensive update to the code pertains to the source control program that the permit requires that we implement for the first time in this term. So I'll have to maybe jog some folks' memories, but back when I was here several months ago discussing the award of the contract to parametrics, I had mentioned that the permit requires these two new major scopes of work or categories of work for the first time. One of those was stormwater management action planning, and the other is source control for existing development. I think all the times that I've appeared before you before in relation to those, it's been on the stormwater management action plan. So tonight's on the second of those requirements. What is required here is that the city begins a new program of requiring pollution control measures, best management practices on a select set of private property, or not necessarily actually private properties, just properties that have the specific set of uses that the permit defines. And they define them using these industry codes. The one that is referenced here is the NAICS codes, and I forget what NAICS stands for, but it's an industry related code that, for instance, when businesses obtain a license to do business in the city, they provide, and it just kind of characterizes what it is that they're doing. And so the permit has this appendix that defines which codes relate to these activities that ecology has determined are potentially pollutant generating. And so we have to identify which of those properties exist in the city, create an inventory of those sites, and we have to inspect 20% of them annually, and ensure that they are, there's some education that's going to be taking place, DPW will undertake with the purveyors of these, typically businesses, to kind of educate them on what are these best management practices. And they, just to give folks a idea of what those requirements look like, these are mostly good housekeeping type requirements. There is no requirement to say build new stormwater treatment facilities on their property, make that kind of like substantial investment. It's more along the lines of if the nature of your business involves storing chemicals that when exposed to rainfall could lead to stormwater pollution, there's proper containment and labeling of those containers. There's some occasional sweeping of parking lots. There's some that kind of generally low intensity housekeeping work that when properly performed helps to minimize how much pollution a site would generate under the influence of rainfall. So the amendments in the code here are what establishes that inventory, defines which, names specifically which types of businesses are going to be placed on it, defines what it is that DPW will be doing as far as the inspections are concerned, and kind of ties the site owner's compliance with those measures to existing enforcement measures in the chapter. So this is required to be, or the permit has the requirement to enact this by August, and then there is DPW will be required to begin inspections January of next year. So that's those are the highlights. I should also mention, by the way, I have a member of the consulting team, Erin Ferguson from Parametrics is with me. She helped draft some of the or draft the new language that's presented here, and can assist in addressing questions that might be a little over my head. We'll see.
Okay, council, does anybody have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you very much, Andy. This is very technical material, so a little difficult for council at times to really follow, but we don't have a lot of heavy industry or anything in Lake Forest Park, so I'm mostly interested in how this affects the construction that we do see. I noticed that heavy construction is one of the areas that these new or updated pieces of code govern, and I didn't know whether residential construction falls under that or whether that's something different. I was just curious about it, having seen a number of construction sites in Lake Forest Park during heavy rainstorms where mud is flowing down the street. I just wondered if this kind of covers some of that.
Sure. So I'm going to take my shot at that question, and then Erin can jump in after me if I misrepresent anything. My understanding here is that the type of activity you're referring to is already regulated under a different section of the permit. That's part of the controlling runoff from development and construction activity section. That's actually the stuff that's regulated by the Stormwater Management Manual. I believe that the inclusion of heavy construction type industry on this inventory means that if you have, let's say, a contractor has their headquarters and their home base of, where their equipment is staged in Lake Forest Park, and they have a yard where that sort of, not building activity, but just the operational activity that they have for running a heavy construction business is conducted. They have, source control BMPs that they have to implement on their site. Does that sound correct to you, Erin? Yes. Okay.
It does. Had to
Okay,
find that
thank you.
mute button.
Thank you. That's an important distinction. And I was also wondering, we will soon see what I think of as heavy construction along the State Route 522 as Sound Transit moves into their work to widen the road and prepare it for bus rapid transit. Will they be governed by any of the material that you're presenting here tonight?
They will be governed by the Stormwater Management Manual, yes. That it's a very low threshold in our code. As a matter of fact, our code sets a lower threshold for when the standards in the manual apply than the manual does for when a certain amount of impervious surface is created or disturbed. I think the King County's manual has a 2,000 square foot threshold, and this precedes my time here, but the city elected to lower that threshold to 1,000 square feet. There's very little construction activity that doesn't trigger some regulation under that manual. So that a large project like you're describing, absolutely.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to go Councilmember Riddle and Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you. Question about, so that within this code, or is there a method to report violators or fines or anything like that? Or is it purely educational, getting people back up to code?
It's the former. It is, there is a requirement here that we will begin with education and making sure that the folks or the site owners who are going to be part of this program and placed on this inventory understand what is required. And my interpretation of the enforcement approach that's spelled out in the code is that you definitely start with a soft touch. There are warning letters. There's an attempt to gain compliance voluntarily as many ways as possible. And then if you're dealing with a disengaged or purposeful violator of the chapter, then the chapter has provisions for assessing penalties and using a firmer approach. There again, I'll ask Erin or Kim if I'm interpreting the enforcement language appropriately, but that sound right?
She nodded.
Okay.
This might be more of a Kim question, which is why I paused, but yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah, there definitely are enforcement provisions, and there are current enforcement provisions as well that just stay there and keep going.
Okay. And then just for maybe the next touch, just a better sense of what industries would actually that we have in Lake Forest Park would fall under this, just to give us a better sense of what that might look like, and just what would the impact be on our community, how many areas. So appreciate more information on that maybe later.
Sure, I can give you a high level estimate
Okay.
now. The inventory is developing, but I can tell you we're far enough along now that we know it's going to be between about 80 sites and 140 sites.
Okay.
The difference between those two numbers are some that are questionable in how they're characterized in Department of Revenue data or city licensing data. And so the consultant's going to be doing some, they call them windshield surveys. They just kind of drive and, put the eyeball test on it and see if the activity that's there matches the description, that ecology intends to regulate. So it's order of magnitude. I get the sense it's a smaller inventory, kind of in lockstep with the size of this community generally. It's than other cities.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Bodie, then Councilmember Farrah-Tommy.
Thank you very much. Andy, I'm looking at the provision that says the Public Works Department will annually inspect at least 20% of the businesses or sites identified on the inventory. And I was interested in the first question, which is how many sites and businesses are likely to be on the inventory to start with? And then second, are we required to inspect at least 20% by some regulatory provision? And then third of all, how are we going to staff and resource that? Because that could be a substantial workload. And I know when we think about budget, we're all wondering. There are a lot of things coming the way of the Public Works Department. Let's just put it that way. So I'm interested in whether we have to do that, how big the workload is, and whether we think we can handle it.
Yeah, thank you for those. Those are good questions. So as to the question of the requirement, yes, that 20% number comes directly from a provision in the permit. And in fact, I'd say that the way that this language is drafted, my encouragement to our consultant has been that we're seeking to implement what we're required to do, and leave it at that for now. That is, we're not proposing anything in here that, in my understanding, isn't tied directly to permit requirements. And as to the level of effort and how we resource that is the subject of a report that the consultant has coming to us soon. Isn't available yet, but it is, this is a task in their contract to help us understand, if we have an inventory of 100 sites and that means we're inspecting 20, how many labor hours does that relate to, and what are the options, using city staff or a contractor, what would the associated costs look like for that? And I shouldn't speculate on what those numbers will be until I have the report. But it's for an inventory of this size, I don't expect that the resource impact is going to be very significant.
So where would the money for the inspections come from?
Well,
If it's a new activity for the Public Works Department, do we get to charge user fees of some sort?
We are entitled to do that. I think Erin and I were just talking about this earlier this afternoon. I don't know offhand if the code already gives DPW or the city, staff the authority to create these fees, but that, am I right? Correct, Erin, that is within your power to grant us the ability to do? Is that?
Yeah, so I just noticed and noted for Andrew today that some jurisdictions, I think Port Angeles, maybe Bothell, do charge for inspections for people on an inventory. That was not something that was included in the amendment, but it is something that you all have the authority to do and could be considered as part of the sort of plan. And other consultants in my firm are working on that structure of how much it's going to cost and where that cost can come from, but that's an element that I think we can think about. And it is possible, this really just came up today, so if we can follow up for sure, but it's possible that you already have the authority to, or I know you have the authority to do that. I just don't know if it's in an ordinance. I don't know if it's something you would need to adopt. But we can do more looking into that, and Kim might know more also. I think I'm assuming that is Kim sitting there. Yeah.
I have one more question from that. So we have the right to go onto people's property to do the inspection without their permission?
I usually caution staff about that and take those on a case by case basis. So I wouldn't want to make a general, wouldn't want to give general legal advice on that.
I defer to the case by case decisions, but that answers my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Fruitami. Oh, so Kim, were you going to say something? Or?
I was going to add one interesting thing is that the NPDES permit actually anticipates that issue. And for inspections where the property owner refuses to allow entry, that actually counts as one of the inspections that Lake Forest Park is required to do. So even if we're not allowed on the property, it still counts, let's say towards that 20%.
Thank you. It certainly sounds like we have a lot of new things to consider. Thanks for all your work on this.
Yes, Councilmember Tommy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Sylvia, for a great report. And, Councilmember Bodie scooped me on a lot of the questions I was going to ask. But I am interested, is the parametrics report going to come out before we see our third touch?
I think it's, that's my expectation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to touch on some of the items that were previously touched on. With regard to the fiscal, while the fiscal report policy implications are that there are no fiscal impacts for the current budget, and I wanted to check is that our consultant costs are carried in our current budget. Is that correct?
The consultant that's helping us now?
Yeah.
So the term of the contract extends into early next year. If it were to, so let's just say that their schedule condensed to finish by the end of this year. The Surface Water Management Fund has adequate funding to support that full amount.
So when we consider the fiscal and policy implications, is there an opportunity to estimate what our future costs are going to be through the implementation of this ordinance?
Oh yeah, that's the answer that the consultant is due to provide in this report that I mentioned. They're going to give us that annual level of effort and associated cost.
So it would be desirable to understand the fiscal implications before we adopt the ordinance. So that goes back to the timing.
Yes, we should know. I mean, I'm expecting that report. Like my original target set in our contract for parametrics was to ensure that we had that report by June, which was when I was advised we would be getting our discussions about the next biennial budget and to have our budget forecast prepared. So yes, we'll be on target to, the third touch of this ordinance is not expected until the end of July.
Okay. And then how often are we required to update the source inventory? Again, it goes back to the fiscal cost of doing that work.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer offhand. Do you know if there's a requirement in the permit, Erin, for the frequency of inventory updates?
The frequency is tied with inspections, and that's within 5 years. And I assume that you add to the inventory or check the inventory at the same time, but that's a question we can clarify for sure. But like I said, my understanding is that the timeline is not putting things on the inventory, it's inspecting the businesses that are on the inventory. But we recommend that that's done annually.
I'm sorry, just for clarification. Updating the inventory annually because you are required to inspect annually 20%.
Exactly.
So there would be a cost to do that update every year.
Yes, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I anticipate that would be a fairly minimal cost, but that'll be studied in the report. And I also, while I'm talking, wanted to reiterate, we are planning to get that cost report to you very soon, well in advance of the July meeting, I believe closer to the beginning of June.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to come back to the topic of inspections. And my question is, are there thoughts to how your department would prioritize which sites are inspected? And in particular, because some of these activities like construction are more temporary, would those be prioritized so that they could be inspected before the construction is finished?
Can I ask you to repeat the second half of that question?
Second, for the more temporary activities like construction, would those be prioritized so that they would those inspections would take place before the construction has been completed?
So temporary activities like construction, I don't believe are regulated under this new program. This is for like an established type of activity, like an ongoing, say, permanent activity that occurs as just a normal course of business for a, you know, the type of business is listed in the chapter. So there's I guess I just want to be clear that like that's not something that's part of this new program.
If I guess for clarification, because the second bullet point says construction of buildings. And so I was interpreting that to mean someone's building a new house or you're adding on to a business, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that could be clearer. I believe that terminology is taken right from the permit. Our understanding of that is that when they say construction of buildings, they mean that that's the nature of the work that the business is in. It's not the activity constructing buildings that is subject to source control BMPs, because it already is under a separate section of the permit. This is for like, contractor X. Y'all use our contractor who's building our ramps. Agostino Construction has headquarters, I think, in Maple Valley, and they have a headquarters yard there, and that's the nature of the business that they're in. They have certain activities just with running their administrative arm of their work, or their staging and just kind of not their work site, but just their corporate headquarters. There's still pollution generating activity associated with that, and that's the activity that's regulated here. And then as to the question about prioritizing the sites, that's a really good question that we haven't. It's on the to-do list, is determine how we're going to prioritize these sites. I mean, I think we're gonna try to think about this as rationally as we can. We'll identify which of these sites on our inventory are adjacent to, say, sensitive areas, which there's elements here about when we receive complaints about pollution activity that is occurring at one of our inventory sites. I believe we're required to inspect those as part of our minimum 20% in that year. And yeah, we don't have it fully fleshed out, like what the prioritization method looks like, but it'll be, the goal I guess just forecast is going to be to ensure we inspect the ones that are most important to inspect for protection of water quality.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for clearing up my misunderstanding.
Fair misunderstanding.
Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Sylvia, for another outstanding presentation. Just a quick follow-up. Councilmember Bodie asked a bunch of questions, covered a bunch of things I was going to ask earlier. But just on the question of the 20%. So it sounds like what you're saying is that when you have a source control that could potentially need regular inspection, but rather than on a sort of leapfrogging every 2 years, or somebody might be inspected every year. How would that, because I can certainly think of some industries that, or in a specific industry that could use that inspection every year.
Yes, we can prioritize the inspections that way. I've gathered, or I've been advised, that the spirit of the way ecology drafted the language, even if this is not explicit, is that all sites should be inspected within that 5-year term, but you are permitted to prioritize. If, just to use an extreme example, if you wanted to pick the same 20 sites on your inventory and inspect those 5 years in a row, that would not be a non-compliant way of conducting the inspections. Does that sound right, Erin?
Yeah, the permit here is not clear. It does not say how you have to prioritize inspections, and it does not say whether you have to inspect every single one on the inventory in a certain amount of time. You have to create an inventory and you have to conduct 20% every year and do the whole thing in 5 years. So yeah, you can interpret it to mean that you could do the same group. Our recommendation has been that you should aim to investigate or inspect, I'm sorry, I was lost for that word, inspect as many as you can within that 5-year period and not focus on one targeted group, and to focus, well, you can decide what you want to prioritize, but I think how Andrew described it is the ones that could create the most damage seems most consistent with how the NPDES permit is worded.
So that flexibility it exists within the structure, and as well as, so it can be reflective of our environmental values here if we deem that it's necessary. I'm not suggesting that all these sites would need to be inspected on a more regular basis than, but in the case of there was a non-compliance, a violation, subsequent follow-ups over a period of time would seem very prudent to make sure that they not just compliant the next year, but continue to remain compliant and no challenges there. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Bodie. Oh, sorry.
I'm so sorry. One helpful component that I realized we have not mentioned is the complaint-based inspections. There are provisions in the permit and in the ordinance that provide that if there's a credible complaint, that we would need to inspect that. So that's sort of another way to be sure that sort of the most likely to cause harm, we do get out there and inspect, and all like city employees, citizens can all file those complaints and trigger another inspection.
Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you. I was looking at the list of potential sources, and it leaves me with the uncertainty of how we have 80 to 140 of those sources in these kinds of categories in our city. So I'm not necessarily asking you to address that, but I think if I were one of those sources, I would want to know that I was being put on a regulatory list. And so I want to raise the question of notice to when we have a draft inventory. Are we going to put out notice to the people who are on those inventories and give them a chance to comment? Because I would not want to be put on a regulatory inventory by surprise. So I don't know what we envision in terms of public engagement before we finalize that list.
Yeah, absolutely, we will be. There's a specific task in Parametrics contract for outreach to businesses associated with this program that has a plenty adequate budget to make sure that we have touch points with everyone who's going to be placed on the inventory. And I'm confident will be enough to give them sufficient education to help them understand what is required, what the inspection process will look like, how the city will work with them, in the event of non-compliance, everything to be expected.
So they have a chance to argue why they shouldn't be on the inventory?
Yes, I would suppose so. That's and I guess I'm a little stumped here as to what the sort of formal process would look like for contesting and potentially inspiring an amendment to the inventory, but I'll look into that for you. It's an interesting.
At least a conversation. So I appreciate the complexity of this. Part of what I'm realizing is this is really a pretty significant and difficult undertaking for us. And it sounds simple at first, but I appreciate the analysis and work that you're all going through to pull it together. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. So in section 1625-047B, where you talk about providing information, that's just in response to the question from Councilmember Bodie about providing information to businesses that are put onto the source control inventory list.
Give me that section number one more time.
1625-047, subsection B.
It's under the inspections.
Yeah. Page
Oh,
15.
okay, I'm finally getting to it here. Okay. So start with, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's included here in the description of the inspection process. So I think that's the intent, is here we're committing to that educational piece, to, you know, ensuring that the business owners have the information they need, understand why it is that the activity on their site is being regulated, which best management practices apply. Like we haven't really talked about it much, but there's a specific manual that King County publishes called the Surface Water Pollution Prevention Manual, and it's, you know, essentially this collection of best management practices that each relate to different types of activity. And so, you know, say for instance, for, you know, the ones that come first to mind are the ones that we currently follow, because we have to follow this manual in our activities on the Public Works operations site. So we you know, frequently refer to, say, there's an activity defined for, say, street sweeping or ditch cleaning, and it just outlines your, you know, what the proper procedure is for doing that work. So this educational piece is, I think, intended to do things like introduce site owners to the contents of that manual, kind of help them determine which of these are applicable to the work or activity happening on your site. How's this going to relate to what's going to be inspected? What are we going to be looking for? Just so they know what to prepare for, that there's no surprises, and that, you know, hopefully they understand what.
Just to clarify, though, it would be intended to provide that information when businesses are identified as a source, as part of the source control inventory, and not as part of the inspection process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then just a follow-up question. Under the enforcement, and I apologize, I haven't read all the references, but is there authority to stop a discharge at the discretion of the director? Because it seems rather educational, but in this chapter, at least, I didn't see an authority or an ability to stop a discharge, other than just to say, please don't do that.
Right. Well, we've run into this recently, as it turns out, because this is the same chapter that regulates illicit discharges generally. And it is complicated. I'd ask for Kim's support in giving a precise description of what we're entitled to do, but you know, we have the we don't have the right, as I understand it, to enter onto a property and conduct activity. I believe that the director has like emergency authorization to, say, enter onto a site to confirm if something has happened, like conduct observations and you know, sort of conduct activities of a non-destructive nature, but we don't have authorization to enter onto a property and perform work. Say, like, if you're trying to stop a discharge, that's likely going to require some type of physical intervention, and I don't believe we have the authority to do that absent the property owners giving us permission to enter the site and do something like that. Is that what you're asking? Sounds like.
Well, if the owner has a discharge that's running off the site, you don't have to walk onto the site necessarily to see the discharge, but I don't appreciate that we have the authority to say, stop that, other than please stop that.
We have
much more authority than please stop that. It's in 1625-050, and it also falls under our general code compliance, which is in Title 1. And so we can use those procedures, and in emergencies, get things stopped. The city can take action itself to offsite stop an illicit discharge, and then charge the owner for that abatement activity. So there is quite a bit of authority
maybe just for my reference or others to send me the reference?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just a quick question in the document, the ordinance, whatever, the attachment. Thank you. It mentions business or residential. Could you describe what would apply to residential, if anything?
Well, I think it's the nature of the activity that is regulated at the heart of all this. Whether it's part of a site that is zoned for business use or residential use or is occupied by that kind of use, I think is kind of secondary. It's things like business licensing and their registration under those codes is one handy way we have of identifying where those activities exist. But if we had another means of confirming that a type of activity listed here was a sort of a typical use of a site, and it also happened to be a residential use or residential zoned property, that wouldn't, it could be on the inventory, it'd be eligible or need to be placed on the inventory.
Okay. Because I was thinking, I mean, that wouldn't be considered under our percentage of sites, obviously. It wouldn't be necessarily a fixed site that was always doing that activity, but it would fall under perhaps the complaint portion of the code.
Yes, I think I understand your point that it's sort of hard to imagine what type of residential property would be conducting that, one of these types of activities. And I agree I haven't perused the draft inventory to see if we have any residential zoned or occupied uses on it. I don't think so, or I'd be surprised if we did. The complaint piece of this, I think, refers to sites that are already on the inventory. Like if we frequently already respond to complaints of pollution that may emanate from residential property. But those are typically one-time incidents that we're, responding to and helping to address, clean up, educate the property owner about what not to do that has led to that discharge. Here, Aaron could maybe help me in affirming if this is a valid interpretation of the meaning of these activities. But my understanding is that these activities are meant to be like ongoing, typical, like routine uses of a site, not something that happens one time. Wouldn't.
Yeah, and I just really like to think about it as the activity, as you said, is it a potentially pollutant generating use? And like some sort of home occupation, home business, maybe even a non-conforming use in a residential area. I think you're all right that this is probably less common, but possible. And so the permit is written in a way that it can cover those sort of recurring pollutant generating activities, even if they're in a residential property.
Yeah, because I note that I think one of the best management practices shall be applied to lawn watering with potable water, landscaping maintenance. So there's some very vague and broad definitions there that fall under any business or residential activity. And so I'm just trying to gather where the scope really is. I understand the intent, but what the language in here implies something perhaps larger than the intent. The other comment is around things like discharge of automobile, petrol and stuff like that. Would this perhaps be a code that we would be able to, I don't want to say enforce, but bring to bear for the 522 direct discharge to the lake, and putting some pressure on WashDOT to actually take and manage that free discharge?
That's an interesting question. You're just referring to the everyday use of that highway corridor as being subject to high vehicular traffic and that having a pollution generating element to it? And can we
It's a s-
kind of
yeah,
chase what?
yeah. Those kinds of roads are a very high source of pollutants, as we know, pollutants from tires that hurt salmon. So
Yeah.
something we would, I think, probably love to regulate. Is this a way to do that?
I have found the state to be very wily in avoiding like our ability to kind of, recover the expense of, work that is created for us on their property. Rights of way is, well, so there's a conformed agreement I'm familiar with that obligates the city to maintenance of the drainage structures in state highways when they are classified as limited access facilities. So they publish a list every year and they say these state highways meet this characterization, and for all those streets, the municipalities have responsibility for maintaining these features, and all those features are outlined in this agreement. And yeah, so for instance, we inspect the catch basins and clean the catch basins as though they belonged to us as part of our meeting our own NPDES permit requirements, because they sort of have found a way to obligate us to do that. So I guess I don't like our chances in in being able to chase that down, but it's I appreciate your questions. I hadn't really thought of that. If like maybe this is a way to to get them. Well, we'll see.
At least partner,
I don't mean to make light of it. I'll look into it, seriously.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, council, I suggest when you come back, before you bring the next one back, I would like the council to have a cow on this subject, so these questions can be asked more thoroughly on a work session. Okay, so let's try to get that so you guys are all in line with that. It's 9 o'clock. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Andy, thank you very much. Aaron, thanks for sitting here all this time. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for keeping an eye on Andy. I know he's a little difficult to work with, so have a great evening. Andy, thank you.
Thank
Go
you
home to the family. Good luck with everything. Have a good holiday weekend, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Very much. Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to action discussion. I think our city administrator is gonna bring discussion on potential merger of the Kirkland Community Response and Radar Response Awareness De-escalation Referral Navigation Program and introduction to potential regional crisis stabilization unit to serve North King County. There you go. You should have that done about 2 minutes.
Is that a mouthful for you?
Yeah.
Thank you, council. So tonight that is as high as it goes. That's the top. This is just a discussion tonight to bring you up to speed. I know that in our one-on-ones, we've had discussion about the expansion of the radar program with the 5-member cities, and then the crisis stabilization unit that we're working with the same member cities as well as King County. Wow, that is blurry. Hopefully Matt can fix that.
It's just a late hour.
Yeah, it's gone to sleep on us. We're having some technical difficulties tonight and we're not sure why. There we go. Okay. I'm going to follow along here too, because I changed this first slide. Just Chief and I realized something else to add. So what was the catalyst for the radar expansion and looking at this? I think we all remember back to George Floyd. We remember to the pandemic. We started looking at police resources, how they're allocated, and what we're asking of our police force to do, which I think everybody would agree we've asked too much of them for too long, and we're not providing the level of service, especially with mental health and crisis situations, substance abuse. And so we've got to take a look at it from that standpoint. The availability of radar navigators, we have 2 to 3 days a week during peak times. We really don't have the resources that we need for all the member agencies. I already mentioned COVID impacts on mental health. I think everybody's seen that. We're continuing to see that. And we've gotten from our community partners as we went through first 2 years of the pandemic, those requests for additional help and how they had to pivot during the pandemic. And then this we'll get to later, the insufficient mental health services in the north end of King County. And then one other thing that Chief reminded me of tonight is president's executive order, while this wasn't a catalyst, it kind of speaks to it, that just came out on policing and promoting comprehensive and collaborative response to persons in behavioral or mental health crisis. So we're on the right track for what we're doing. And I think everybody is recognizing that. Next slide, please. So where are we today with radar? We're the 5 cities, and you can see the 5 cities listed there. As I mentioned, Navigators available 2 to 3 days a week. Partial shifts, typically the peak times. The police chiefs provide the governance oversight, and the current budget, just over 863,000. That is either fully grant funded and some levy out of Bothell with their public safety levy. And so this is, when this was initially put together by the member cities, it was anticipated that this was the start and that we knew that we had to grow it beyond this at some point. And at some point, we'd be looking at ourselves of how we're going to fund this and knowing that the cities individually would need to step up. Next slide. So back in 2020, following things I mentioned earlier, Kirkland started looking at providing their own community responder program. Radar wasn't big enough for what they were seeing in their communities. They worked with their fire department, how they could have, EMTs, work to provide these services and work with navigators. They allocated about $2 million in their 21-22 budget to do this. Also, as we were talking to Brooke with Radar, as we were going through the pandemic, she started exploring with the member cities how we could use ARPA funds to help them and the increase in calls that they had, and how could we possibly expand what they provided. The problem with that approach is that these are one-time dollars. And while we may be able, as we go through this process of expanding Radar, because we have these dollars allocated until 24, spend by 26, is we could buy some of the one-time things that they may need, automobiles, computers, things like that, to make the economies of scale work there. But what could we do long-term? And that's when we got together as a group of city managers and said, okay, how do we move this long-term? These are short-term solutions and they aren't ongoing. So what we came up with, and Shoreline put, we had discussions of what expanding this would look like, talking to Brooke of what would be a full implementation. And what came out of that was this phase 4, which was, and the reason it was in phases is we didn't know how fast we could stand this up. We, at the time, didn't know what the financial model looked like. And it may take the cities, a number of years to be able to pull this together. And so phase 4 was kind of the full build out. I think we'll find as we go through this interlocal agreement process, get a little deeper into that and see, is phase 4, does that work? Does that not only pencil, but does it provide the service that we're expecting? And so that's 7 full-time navigators with shifts that could range 8 to 12 hours with the goal of that 10 to 10 timeframe. That's kind of those peak times that the Radar program has identified along with the police departments, but then having a 24/7 availability of on-call. Full implementation annual costs, and these are today's dollars, and these are rough numbers of roughly 1.5 million. And then as we approach this, my initial request was look at a pro rata share, based on population. And so based on that cost and that pro rata share estimate, we came in just under $57,000. And this is at phase 4. So if it took us a few years to stand this up, obviously lower costs in the earlier years, and then ramping up to this. So where are we headed next? So we have a consultant on board that was hired by Kirkland. Her name is Karen Reed Consulting. Many of the surrounding jurisdictions have used her for several interlocal agreements, several different approaches from different cities. Came highly recommended. As a city, we don't have experience, but the other 4 member cities do have experience with her. And so she has been hired to help us walk through putting together the interlocal agreement. And so what we will need with this is looking at a governance structure that would be an executive board made up of representatives from each city, whether that's city managers and administrators or designees and or elected officials. We don't know what that looks like, but those are the things that we will begin discussing. And then having an operations board of the police and the fire chiefs. We need the boots on the ground. We need the police and the fire who work closely with the radar program so that from an executive level, we aren't doing something that isn't operationally feasible. Set forth formal budgeting, weighted voting structure. So the budgeting we're looking at, is the pro rata share based on population. The weighted voting structure is one of those things that's very nebulous at this point, but that we need to make sure works because we are the smallest city in this coalition. And we need to make sure that we can't be, easily outvoted and not have a say in how radar runs. And so those are things that we will discuss, that items will be brought before each city council as we move through the interlocal agreement discussions to have discussion, get feedback, take back to the group and continue to work towards that ILA. And then outline a process for other cities to join in the future and what that methodology is and how they will contribute financially to that. Because the only thing would be better is to keep growing this. This doesn't look beyond Woodinville, Bothell, Woodinville, kind of that area. As we're looking at the numbers, the number of people accessing these services. This is bigger than just the north end. And so if this could continue to grow, that would be beneficial to the overall system. And then last couple things on the interlocal, we just need to state objectives of the entity, services provided, operational matters, shared dispatch protocols. We have the new 988 system coming out that would be integral to this system. And then just insurance, staff qualifications, et cetera. Who are we looking for to fill these positions? What are the qualifications, et cetera? And then there's fiduciary responsibilities. Currently, Bothell has fiduciary over that. And so how does this all tie together for the long term? And then we'll discuss this in a minute, but how this entity could potentially work with a North County Crisis Stabilization Center and how those tie together, because they'll be two separate entities, but they're going to need to work closely together. So now you can throw up the questions and we'll cover. So like I said, this is very high level. There's not a lot of detail. This is the broad brush strokes of where we're starting. So any questions on radar before we hop into crisis stabilization, which is a quick discussion?
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Sounds like a wonderful program, and I want to applaud all those that were involved to come up with this program. I think when we have the opportunity to work with other cities and create these interlocal agreements, it really leverages all that we have in our community with other communities that we otherwise would not be able to support ourselves. So I think this is a wonderful approach and a great program, and hope that this comes to fruition because I think it's a great opportunity for all of us.
Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, I'm curious, when it comes to expansion, are there any particular challenges if we cross county lines, if we were to expand to a south Snohomish City, or is it similar to expanding east towards Woodinville?
Just shooting from the hip, I think we'd stay within the county. I think there are some issues of crossing county lines. I know Bothell as a city government has some challenges with that. So I don't have the answer today, but I think we would stay within King County, but stay tuned because we're just now starting to discuss that. We haven't even delved into that. These are just key points that as we've met as group over however many months now, 4 or 5 months, these are just those key questions that we want to ask and explore.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Like my colleagues, I think this is really a great example of regional initiatives with cities we've worked with previously and we have a working relationship with and a common set of goals and so forth. I think your caution about voting is really important. I think also making sure we get the level of services that we think we need and that, it's similar to the fire district merger issue. We need to make sure we retain a certain expected level of services. And then last but not least, on the question of expansion, I'm comfortable with this group. I think that, let's say you're talking about expansion to one of the big players like Bellevue or Seattle, I would have a certain amount of caution over that. So I just want to say, I think this regional group that we're working with, we have a lot of track record, we have experience. They don't run roughshod over us. So I feel really good about that. I just would have some caution about expansion and what, similar to Councilmember Goldman's comment, let's make sure that we do it in a way that makes sense and doesn't erode our whole purpose here. So those are just some thoughts, passing thoughts. I know I'm not really asking you questions. I'm more commenting on things of concern to me. Thank you.
Councilmember Castlever.
Just quickly on point, I mean, when you look at how King County looks at the numbers that they report, they don't even include Seattle, because Seattle is its own, entity, and they have a lot of their reporting in their own systems, their own programs. And so, yeah, it doesn't even look at that. So, yeah, I heard.
Thank you very much. I'm just thrilled that that this is happening and that these group of cities is working together. And I think it's absolutely the right thing, the best thing for all the people that live in North King County. So that's a given. The question I have is, how fast can this all occur? What sort of timeline do you think we're looking at to actually bring this off?
Well, I look at it from our standpoint, $57,000. That's, I would jump into phase 4 or phase 5 right now. I think every city would rather move it faster than a phased approach. And I think everybody at this point, if we can get all the nuances figured out, and the governance structure would be to jump in as fast as we can fill the positions, put the structure together, with what Kirkland had set aside, they're in it for like $350,000. They're ready to go today. They've been trying to pull this together and get this started up through the pandemic. They haven't had a lot of success. And it's a tight labor market. So I think that's probably going to be our bigger hurdle than anything of implementation. I think everybody's goal is to look at, we're all going into biennial budgets, so we can all budget for this fall. We would like to have the interlocal in before the end of the year, so we can get this thing going.
That's great news. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your work on this.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I would like to emphasize the importance of appropriate pay for these individuals. I think we want to see that equity. We want to recognize their education, their experience, and the value that they really bring to communities. I think it will also bring a high caliber of individuals to the radar program. So I would like to see what kind of safeguards are in the interlocal agreement to provide that pay that's commensurate with their experience and what they bring to our communities.
Yeah, and that's been one of the discussions, or what are the qualifications that as a group we expect? And then you're absolutely right. I mean, we see this even in the individuals who help address homelessness. And, a lot of those shelters, they're not even paid a living wage.
Yeah.
And so we need to make sure that we structure this such that we are paying people commensurate with their experience, that we get the best people, and we need a stable organization. If we have a lot of turnover on radar, we kind of lose something, because the longer you have those social workers there, the more they understand kind of the repeat clientele, those they see a lot, they understand the nuance. I think the chief can talk all day about how, we have such a stable police force. They know the people in the community. And so, yeah, I think exactly to your point, we need to make sure that we create an organization that people, are attracted to work for.
And I think that leads me to another comment that I almost forgot to say. When we look at expansion beyond our 5 cities, and we start looking at, again, like moving into the Bellevues and, so forth, or the south, of King County, think about in the interlocal agreement, perhaps regionalizing staffing so that we can continue to know the same people and they can really get to know the same environment. I think my fear of expansion is if, you may be working in the north end one week and then south, you don't gain that valuable knowledge and build those relationships with those fragile individuals. So consider some way understanding how that expansion may stay hyper local in some aspect.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, what next, Phil?
Okay, we'll go through this one quickly because this one's even earlier in the process than radar. So next slide. So the crisis stabilization unit, and we've talked about this. We all understand that there's a lack of service in North King County. We have the support from the governor. You know, the mayor and I got to attend a meeting in Kirkland with all the other city managers and mayors, and we have his full support. And you can see it in the 72 million that they put into crisis stabilization facilities within the last budget. You know, you heard our senator speak to it earlier tonight. And so there's a lot of support. It's just how do we do this? And as I mentioned, we need the collaborative approach with radar. But we also have really relied a lot on King County and their expertise. They're usually the ones who stand these up. They work with the service providers. And so identifying the need, which we've got a slide that shows, you know, kind of the need at the north end, helping us identify the providers, who they are, what their interests might be, and location and governance structure. And these are kind of the key points that, as we've discussed with King County, that we need to have in place before we're going to try and go for a capital request with the 2023 legislature. And so if we can answer kind of these key points before we get there, that will help with that request before them. And the providers could be, you know, your typical providers. It could be healthcare providers. So we're exploring all that, and there is quite a bit of interest out there from what we've seen. And so if we can just bring everybody to the table, we can continue to have this discussion. On the next slide, and this is just something that King County put together for the member cities, just kind of look at and understand kind of the utilization. Councilmember Goldman reached out to me on this second one, all events with identified addresses. That looks at people who are within the King County system who may not necessarily have resided in King County until they reached out for services. So their address may currently be outside of King County or may have just recently been out. Maybe they're experiencing homelessness and they're within King County now. And so you see the difference of that number. You see the 1,071 of, you know, somebody with a King County address. So they didn't want, the one thing they wanted to point out is that 20,000 number. They're not sure how representative that is really of North King County without being able to do even more data dive and understand exactly where the individuals came from previously. Did they live in King County, live outside King County? They usually, with homelessness, you report your last address. And so not understanding how they move around. Were they truly always a King County resident or other? And so, but just looking at this, you can see the need, whether they lived here before, live here now, there's still a need. They're still looking for services within North King County, and we don't have them to provide. And so this just kind of gives you a quick down and dirty of the types of utilization that you see across King County that the King County mental health systems has seen. So that's, like I said, that one's really early on in the process. We've done some, Councilmember Riddle, I think, you know, hopped in on some of these, you know, and I'm not sure who else, but I think maybe Councilmember Cassover, some of these online tours of, you know, these crisis stabilization units elsewhere in the state, just to kind of get an idea. But it's really going to rely a lot on King County and their partnership to help us find those providers and then figure out, you know, who pays to get them built. You know, obviously the cities aren't going to run something like this. We have no expertise and no right to be running something like this, but making sure that the contracts and things are in place for the service providers to make sure that we get what they say we're going to get and that we continue to get it for the long term. So very early on, but it's integral to the expansion of the radar program. So stay tuned. That one's still a very early working process.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Yes, Simra.
Briefly, one of the items that I think is already being addressed, but is the flexibility of this building. I mean, as you mentioned, it costs a lot to build a physical building. And right now it's mental health, but we're also dealing with substance abuse and things like that. So looking at this as a flexible sort of environment where we can adjust as needs change in the many years. A facility like this shouldn't be a 10-year facility. It should be a 40, 50-year facility, and we're going to be seeing it used differently. And then the one piece that we haven't talked about, and I know it's kind of an open item, is ways to handle youth with behavioral health issues. And so that's not something that I think has come up with this crisis stabilization center, because I don't believe most of the providers would be doing youth in this environment. It's just not designed for it. But I think that's a greater King County question, is where would we send our youth if we had that need?
And just to your point of the flexibility, I mean, the one thing we're looking at is, so you can get all your federal dollars, whether that's Medicaid, Medicare, how these get paid for is 16 beds. That's the limit. I mean, you can't have more than 16 beds. So you have to look at siting a bunch of these throughout North King County. And, there's the discussion of, putting a couple of 16 beds next to each other that serve the two purposes that you're talking about. And so anyway, I won't get into the politics of that, but.
Thank you, Phil. Now we're going to move on to other business. And Phil, I think you have something under other business.
I do. So as we've been working through our Guild CBA and our Teamsters CBA, we've been talking about the fact that we need to address Juneteenth, and that's coming up. That's a federal state holiday. We currently don't recognize it as a city. And then we got so busy with CBA, it kind of snuck up on us, and all of a sudden here we are almost in June. And so I just wanted to get some initial feedback from the council on approach to this, and then we could bring this back on the 9th. If we're going to take action on this year, we would need to do it by then. So we have two options, really. I've explored with Kim, our legal counsel for our collective bargaining agreements, and we really have two options of how we approach a new holiday. We can, as a city, just make it a new paid holiday, adopt a resolution amending the current employees manual, and then we have no need, there's no impacts and no need to bargain that type of an approach. We would just need to recognize it as an MOU with the police guild. We can recognize it in the CBA with Teamsters because that one's still open. There's two things to a new holiday if you just adopt a purely new holiday. One is you have one additional day of lost productivity for your staff. And then the other one is, well, either way you go on this, police doesn't take every holiday off that everybody else takes off. They have to work. And so you would have some overtime related to, or a specialty pay related to them working on that holiday and then taking it at another time. So there's some fiscal implications there. The other option is to identify the new holiday, but then we have two floating holidays that we all use any time of the year, would be to take one of those floating holidays to pay for this new floating holiday. You don't have the lost productivity because you stay status quo. But the issue that comes up is we would have to bargain that with both of our groups because those have been standard throughout all of their contracts. So I don't need an answer tonight. I just wanted to get you thinking about this. We will bring this back on the 9th with those two options. We explored some other options, but FLSA causes some issues between exempt and non-exempt employees that would just be kind of a morale killer, I think, for those who aren't exempt employees. So these are the two approaches that I think are the most viable to move forward. So if you have some initial questions tonight, great, but I'm not asking for a head nod, a thumb or anything. I just wanted to bring this forward tonight.
Thank you. And yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, thank you for bringing this to us. I think what might be helpful for me at least would be sort of a cost analysis of the two options and what the cost differential would be.
Yeah, I'm just gonna think off the top of my head. I mean,
Oh, you don't have to answer now. I mean,
Okay.
for the June 9th.
for the June
meeting.
9th, that'd be sufficient? Okay,
Yes.
then we won't do math on TV.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Phil, I guess. Thank you. A lot for us to think about. Okay, Councilmember reports, council committee reports, I'm gonna ask nicely because my blood sugar is down to 67 and I'm gonna about pass out. I didn't plan very well for us. And I know that we all talked about 5 hours ago about what we were gonna have for dinner and none of us went and had dinner. So if you can make your reports pretty quick would be great for the greater of the mayor. I'd say the greater of the good, but greater for me. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, colleagues, just a reminder, there's been a request to move the budget and finance meeting to Wednesday, June 15th. Is everyone in agreement that that would work for their calendars? Head nods, thank you. And the other thing is just another respectful reminder that because of Juneteenth, our committee of the whole falls on Juneteenth, on the 20th. And we have previously discussed that our committee of the whole meeting, was it a committee of the whole? I guess it was a committee of the whole meeting, that we'd meet on Tuesday, the 21st. So I just want to make sure that everybody's still okay with that. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council committee reports, council member reports. Okay, mayor report. I better not make it very long, huh? No, I'm just joking. Real quick, Ballinger Forum, you guys are well representative. We are the last city on the bottom of the run, and I can guarantee you, we'll have a lot to talk to you about, but I guarantee you with Tracy, myself, Andy was there, and we actually had a former council member, Mr. Feeney, who is definitely a great source. So we'll be watching that very closely on what happens there. Otherwise, I know we have a 3-day weekend staff. I hope you guys have a great time off. Lindsay, drive safe going home. And with that, anything else good for the order or anything like that? With that, have a great night. Thank you, Matt, for a great job too. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Adjourned. Good night. Love you all.